Hello students, my name is Mr. Simba and I will be your math teacher. Our topic today, actually the unit is algebra, and the topic will be solving quadratic equations using completing the square method. The objective of the lesson is, at the end of the lesson, the student will be able to solve quadratic equations with 1 as a coefficient of x squared using completing the square method. Are you familiar with the quadratic equations? Have you done them with your teacher? Today we are going to explore this topic together. You are welcome. Okay, let's review some of the ways we solved quadratic equations. And before that, let's ask ourselves a question. And this is for you, the student. What is a quadratic equation? What do you understand when you see this word quadratic equation? Well, can you try to give the answer? I can imagine the answers. Okay, it might be difficult to define or to explain what it is, but we can use the general quadratic equation to explain what it is. Actually, it's an equation that's written in this form, the way you see it, where we are given ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Note that it must be equal to 0. And then what are these a, b, c? Maybe you're asking me. Can somebody guess? What is it? Let's see. Well, a is a coefficient of the x squared. Look at that x squared there. The value that comes before it is what we call coefficient of a squared. Then b is a coefficient of x. And c, we call it the constant, okay? So those are the value meaning of that. So any equation you see in this form, whether you know what a, b, c is called quadratic equation, and it is in general form. Okay. Now, can you think of a specific examples of that general equation now where a, b, c is given some values? Look at this one. Number 1, you can have your a is 1, your b is 1, and your c is 1. This is a quadratic equation. Another one, you can also have a is 1, b is 4, and c is 4. Another quadratic equation. Third one, you can see now, a is 2, b is 5, and c is 3. Another quadratic equation. And the last one also, you can have values that are negative. You can see a is -3, b is -2, and c is 1. So all these are examples of quadratic equations. Have you made these equations before in your class, in your math class with your teacher? I guess so. Okay, let's proceed. Now let's look at this. One of the ways we have learned how to solve quadratic equation is by a method we call factorization. This method, we know it. And look at this example here. You are given a question like solve by factorization. And you need to note this is a quadratic equation. Why? It is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, where a is 1, b is 4, c is 4. I think we've seen this equation previously. Now, how did you solve this question? Student, can you try it? This is very easy, I'm very sure. Have you got the answer? Okay, let's see. Now, this equation, there are two important concepts you need to keep in mind. There is a product and a sum that will help us to factorize. The product is given by the coefficient of A, which is 1 here, times C, which is 4, to give you 4. That 4 there. Then the sum is very easy. It's just a coefficient of B. You don't care what it is. If it's just the value that's sitting where B sits, just take it as a sum. Now, how do we proceed with factorization? It's very easy. You think of two numbers. When you multiply them, you get 4. And the same two numbers, when you add them, they give you a sum of 4. Now look at our numbers here. Let's start with our sum, it's 4. Our product, sorry. Think of two numbers, when you multiply, you get 4. There are two possibilities. Can you see them? Tell me, which one do you see? There is 2 times 2. That's correct. Which other one can you see? There is also -2 times -2 will give you 4. Correct. But now, to be sure you choose the right numbers or two pairs of numbers, you look at the sum here. Ask yourself, which of those two pairs, when I add them, they give me a sum of 4? And you realize the numbers is 2. Okay, 2 and 2. And now we just take x. Look at this x here. Just take the x without the power, put it down. Okay, here, I don't know, take the number you picked, 2, put it there, and because there are 2 of them are the same, you get equal pairs like that. We say you are factorized. And the whole expression is equal to 0. This you have done before. By equating each factor, the factor is this one here. Each factor is equal to 0. Now there's a mathematical truth, students, here. Listen to me. Listen to me here, very important. When you have two, we call them unknowns, and you multiply them, they give you a 0. Let's say like A times B is equal to 0. It means one of them must be 0. A can be 0, B can be 0, or both can be 0. And we use this to equate the factors by 0. That's why I took each factor I said is equal to 0, because it can be 0. And because the factor is the same, the factors are the same, what do you get? We get the same answer, which is x is equal to -2. By solving that simple linear equation, you get the answer. This we have done. Okay? Any question, students? All right. Are you okay? I trust you enjoyed the lesson. Now, this is now the heartbeat of our lesson today. Please listen to me. And I forgot to mention to you initially now, you need your pen, you need your notebook, and if possible, a calculator with you, because we are going to work together. So make sure you are not left behind, we work together. The method that we are going to learn today is called completing the square method. To understand this method, let's try to solve this question here by the same method we have just learned, the method of factorizing. Now, I have a question for you. Try to factorize this question. Look for two factors, which you can put in the brackets where there is question marks, such that the two numbers, when you multiply, you get 9. Okay, you get the product, which is here. And the two numbers, when you add, you get 2. Anyone who has the answer? Try. What do you notice? Were you able to factorize? This, you realize Those who could not factorize it, you are not wrong. Actually, don't think you don't know maths. You are doing very well. This question cannot be factorized. It's not factorizable. So we cannot use this method of factorizing to solve it. And that's why now I bring in the new method called method of completing the square. This method, we use it when we cannot factorize, because factorization is easier. So if you can factorize, use factorization. But also in the exam, I can set an exam or a question for you, and I specifically tell you to use this method of completing by square. So it's important you learn it, all right? Okay, did you come to the same conclusion as mine there? We cannot factorize it, all right? So we go to a new method, completing the square. Are you ready to go with me? Are you ready? Now, to solve this equation, we need the method of completing the square. Listen to me, my students. Please pay attention, because what I'm about to say is very important. Very important. Okay? Now, the idea of completing the square has one purpose: to change that quadratic expression to what we call perfect square expression. Okay? And we saw perfect square expression, I've got two equal factors. The way we saw x plus 2 times x plus 2, that was the same. Okay? Look at this example. X squared plus 2x plus 1. Two numbers that when you multiply, you get the product of 1 is 1. The two numbers you add, you get 2. Therefore, I can factorize them. Now, let me give you a trick here, students. How do you know that an expression is perfect square? Very easy. You look at the product. Ask yourself, what are the two factors that when I multiply, I get 1? If they are the same, it means that expression is perfect square. You don't have to look for another one. Therefore, that's why you realize, I realize 1 times 1 is 1. And I just wrote x plus 1 for the first term factor and the second factor. And I remember you can square them. No more way of a times a is a squared. We know this, simple algebra. Another one is this one, x squared plus 6x plus 9. What do you notice? Focus on the product, 9. Think of two numbers, when you multiply, you get 9. Can you think of them? Two factors? Well, somebody will tell you 3. Good, if you got 3. But also somebody will tell you minus 3 is correct, because minus 3 times minus 3 will give you 9. Great. But how do you know which is which? You look at the product. The product will control your choice, all right? Ask yourself, which are the two factors when I add, I get 6, not negative 6, eh? Be careful here, 6, and the factors are 3 and 3. If you chose minus 3 and 3, what happens? This minus 3 plus minus 3, this becomes minus 6, which means it's not what we need. This tells you you cannot use minus 3, okay? Good. These are examples of perfect square expression. We are going to work with these many times. Now, how does this method work? And I want you to keep on asking yourself this question as you go through. How does it work? Every step, ask yourself, how does it work? Okay, I'll pick the same example there. Okay, and we are told to complete a square. Let's see what happens. There are 3 key important steps, or 3 important steps that we have to keep in mind. The first one is we take the constant to the other side. Now, what is the constant? The c value here. It was here, minus 9. I don't want it here. I want it to come here where 0 is. How do I do this? In mathematics, we don't just move numbers, we perform operations. So to eliminate this 9 here, it's a minus, okay? I need to add 9, so that 9 minus 9 is 0. But also what happens on the left also happens on the right. That's why we are saying we add 9 both sides. It will look like that, are not simplified, okay? Let's see what happens. When you simplify, you realize now you have x squared plus 2x alone. We call them variables. Their knowns are together. And the known on the other side, which is 9. Okay? These are their knowns, and this is the constant alone there. This is the first step. Have you got it, students? If you got this, you got the first step of learning how to solve quadratic equations using completing the square method. Step 2. Step 2, and this now I want you to pay attention a little bit because I don't want to miss you. Are you with me? Okay. Now, you need to have the coefficient of x. Then I square it. I'm trying to interpret this sentence now here and add it both sides. Now I will explain what I mean. I did it here for you. I did it here for you. Now, you come to the equation. Go to the original equation. Don't get confused. It's here. What is your coefficient of x? It is 2. I'm saying a half of it is divided by 2. Divide 2 by 2. That's why I took it. B is my B there, okay? I took it there, divide by 2, then I square it. It became 2 divided by 2 squared. Now, if you can see it's 1 squared. 1 squared is 1. That step is very important, okay? You must find out what is a half the coefficient of b squared. What is it? And that's how we find it. We got it. This one is 1. Now, what you do is now you add that I have the coefficient of your x squared, both sides. You see 1 is in red. I had it both sides now. Because in mathematics, what happens on one side must also happen on the other side, okay? And then you can simplify. You get x squared plus 2x plus 1 is equals to 10. Stop a minute. Look at what is on the left. What do you see? Try to factorize it. Do you notice the product is 1 and the sum is 2? This means and 2 factors will be 1 times 1, which is 1, and also 1 plus 1 is 2. It's a perfect square. And that's why we said this method, we are trying to change all the quadratics we are given to perfect square expressions. Then we can work with them. Now, once you reach there, now you can use any method you know. But I want you to stick to the method of complete the square. So we have completed the square now. On the left, what do? You factorize. We factorize this expression now. I've already assisted you. I give you a moment to factorize it, please. Can you do it? Okay? If you have been able to write x plus 1, those 2 factors squared, you are on the right track. Okay, like that. And don't forget to equate it to what is on the right equal to 10. Now, what do? We proceed. Now, look at that. When what I need, I have x plus 1, that factor squared. All of it is squared. Then I take then it's squared. I want to release it. I want to leave x alone and 1 alone so that I can do something with it. So what do? I take square root both sides. Do you see that? Look at the square root sign. What do you get? If you take the square root of a square, you get the factor inside the bracket, which is x plus 1. Students, are you with me? Don't get lost, please. I need you. All right? Okay. And what do you get? Now, in algebra, there are possibilities that the answer can be positive, also negative. Why? Because we know negative 2 times negative 2 gives you 4, and 2 times 2 gives you 4. So we take the possibility of being a positive or negative. That's why I'm putting plus or minus. 2 answers in one there, okay? Then what do you do? Very easy. You take the 1 to the right. How do you do subtract? Actually, subtract 1 both sides. What do you get? You get your x is equal to minus 1 plus or minus root 10. Actually, mathematically, this is the most accurate answer. But now, in your course, sometimes you are told to give the answer correct to specific number of significant figures. If it's not stated, you are supposed to state it correct to 3 significant figures. Therefore, we have to proceed and use your calculator now. Don't waste time. You can just put the way it is in your calculator and place equal sign, and you get the answer. Okay? And when I did that, okay, I did some more calculations for you. You can see that. But the correct answer will just be x is equal to 2.16. That's one solution. All can be x is equal to minus 4.16. And these answers are written correct to 3 significant figures. So far, so good. You okay, students? All right. Let's look at one more example to reinforce what we have learned. Okay? Let's try to remember the 3 steps. Okay? Now, we are told to solve x squared minus 3x minus 12 is equal to 0 by completing the square method. Now, remember the 3 steps. The first step is we separate the constant from the variables, from their knowns. And that's the first step we always do. And because it's minus, we eliminate it by adding 12, both sides. Okay? And I did it here. You can see that. I recommend putting down the steps the way they are. Then you simplify later. And when you simplify, you get that expression, x squared minus 3x is equal to 12. That's step 1. What is the next step? Can you remember the next step? Okay, is there in front of you? All right. We add half the coefficient of x squared to both sides. Now, first calculate the half the coefficient of x. Then we square it. All right? Look at that. Make sure you identify your coefficient of x is minus 3. What is a half of that? It is minus 3 divided by 2. Remember, a half means divide by 2. Okay? Then I square it. And when I do that, negative 3 squared is 9, and 2 squared is 4. Now, I want to caution you here. You realize it doesn't matter whether you take negative 3 or 3 here. If you want, you can take the number alone without a sign. Why? Because the square here will always make it positive. The square will always make it positive. So if you find these signs are disturbing you, you can just take 3 over 2. It will be 9 over 4. It will not change your answer. All right? The next now, we got our coefficient of, half the coefficient of b squared. What do? We added both sides of our expression or equation. And you can see it's in red there, so that you can see where I'm slotting it in. Then you simplify it, okay? And use your calculator there, because we use calculator option. You are allowed to use your calculator to simplify that expression. And when you do this, what do you do? What happens? 12 plus 9 over 4, you should get 57 over 4. And the other expression is the way it is. Imagine now what is on the left is now already a perfect square expression again. Okay? Now, listen to me. Listen to me here, because you need to know how to pick the factors from an expression that is already perfect square. All right? To do this, you'd pick your x and your I have the coefficient of x. Okay, let's see. We have already formed a perfect quadratic expression. Remember, when you add, I have the coefficient of b squared both sides. You have made it perfect square expression. And you don't have to worry whether it makes sense or not now. I want to show you how to extract your factors from this expression. Okay? Now, look at what I've written down here. Look at this here. I pick x here, not squared, x. I write it here. I take 3, I divide by 2. Is a half of the coefficient of b. I write it here. Then I square that, meaning there are 2 equal factors, because it's a perfect square expression. And when I've done that, it's done. And then you say it's equal to what is on the right. That is 57 over 4. All right? Let's proceed and solve this question. Then we need to solve it by taking square root both sides. You see, it's a repetition of the same. Now, when you take the square root both sides, actually, this is the square root. The answer will be x minus 3 over 2, which is equal to the square plus or minus square root of 57 over 2. Now, how come I wrote a 2 there? Because the square root of 4 is 2. Look at this. Because this can be taken as square root of 57 divided by square root of 4. I did not write that down, but you need to know that. So therefore, 57, we cannot get exact square root, so I left it like that. I don't want to introduce decimals too early. It will cause errors, so make sure you don't do that. But 2, I can write it because it is a square root of 4. All right? Then I proceed, I get the answers. Remember now when I transfer my 3 over 2 to the right, by what? By adding 3 over 2 both sides, I get the exact solution to this question. But I say it again, you might be required to write to significant figures or round it. Therefore, proceed and use your calculator, and you should be able to get the answers. Now, I want to explain this a little bit. It means x is equal to 3 over 2. You can get the answer with the plus first, square root of 57 over 2. That's one solution. The second one will be x is equal to 3 over 2 with a minus. That's the second solution here. Okay? Minus square root of 57 over 2. That's why now I split them. You have to split them out down here to get 2 answers. That's why they are here. And you use your calculator now if you want to get the exact values correct to 3 significant figures. Actually, the knowledge of getting this solution is not part of this lesson. It's a previous lesson in year 4 when you learned about approximations and estimations. So please use that knowledge. All right, some practice. Okay, take your pen, paper, exercise book. Try this. First check, is it a perfect square? can you factorize it? But whether you can do that or not, I want you to use a method I've shown you. Try to use method 1. Move the constant to the left. Step 2, add or halve the coefficient of x and simplify. Then you'll have made it perfect square. Take square root both sides, if you remember the steps, and solve the equation. Okay? Also, there's another one to try. Okay? And also a third one to try. How many minutes do you want me to give you? If you are quick, this one can take you maybe not less than 10 minutes, 3 of them, because you are using a calculator. Okay? Okay, students, what have we learned today? Try to think about it. Because the beauty of maths is you don't cram. You try to understand. And if you forget the formula and you've understood the steps, you can develop the formula yourself. So, solving quadratic equations by completing the square method is a very important method when we cannot factorize the quadratic equation. That's very important. Okay? When you find you are having difficulty in factorizing your quadratic equation to solve it, please switch to this method or complete the square. We said it involves 3 steps. Separate the constant from the terms containing the unknowns. We call them variables. Okay? Secondly, add the both sides. That is, take a half of the coefficient of b, square it. I'm going to interpret part 2 now. Then add it to both sides. That's the meaning of that. Then you simplify. By doing step 2, you have already made or created a perfect square expression. You don't have to worry. The third step is just factorize. Identify the 2 factors the way I've shown you and work it out. So, for further assistance, please consult your maths teacher. I'm sure you'll be able to help you. But also I have some exercise for you. If you have this textbook, it's a very good textbook. I want you to solve this exercise using the method of completing the square. Okay, my students, wonderful. Bye for now. Have a good time.